wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And before we get it stuck into today's podcast, which is in response to a beautiful listener's email, we'd love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe with your email, where once a week we will send you a wrap-up of everything we've put out in the world with links so you can pick and choose what you'd love to dive deeper into. And occasionally we'll send you another email that's just amusing, a conversation, an epiphany, an awakening, something we think would tickle your fancy on this conscious journey of womanhood and motherhood. So nourishingthemother.com.au. So today's podcast, where we're going to start this, is I'm actually going to read an email that we got from one of our beautiful listeners, because I think it's actually really gorgeous and totally spoke to my heart, and I know it spoke to yours as well.
And it was really in response to our podcast, where we really asked for mothers to come forward and say, what would you love to hear from other mothers?
Yeah, after your documentary one, because we're really sitting with, what is the thing that we would all love to just normalize, know, explore, dive into, you know, within motherhood, because that's definitely where we want to take the conversation.
Yeah.
So let me read this email and then let's go from there. So here we go. This beautiful listener says, "Hi ladies, what I'd love to know the truth about. When did you fully accept and then sit in your motherhood? The changes having a baby brings in your own lifestyle, time, thoughts, physical body, memory, daily tasks, demands on you and only you, your relationship, your sense of self, place in the world, etc. When did you accept it all? The changes to your life that occur and thus make up motherhood. And similar and most likely linked, I believe anyway. When did you actually fully, deeply, body-yearningly, mind-blowingly fall in love with your child? I'd love to know the differences between the truths of women in these deeply vulnerable questions that cut to the core."
Oh, I just love that.
I know. I knew you would. Me too. As soon as I read it, I was like, you know, absolutely. Gosh, Bridge, where do you even want to start with this?
There's just such richness to that, because when do you? I think you're constantly evolving. I think you're constantly finding new edges to yourself, new identities that you're crashing against, and who you thought you were and who you're now facing.
Yeah. And the more you sit one-sided, the more you're hit and smacked with the other side, which forces you to balance it. I don't know that there's this pinnacle that you actually reach where you go, I've hit it. I freaking love motherhood 100% of the time. I'm deeply and utterly divinely in love with all of my children all of the time, and I hold everything they bring to the table.
I think that's an illusion. I think that I really do, but I do believe that the more you can integrate, the more you're able to more willingly embrace the polarizations that are motherhood. You know,
absolutely.
You know, the extremes of incredible heart-bursting joy and fulfillment and just rapture, and then those days that are like gone to hell in a handbasket and you just want to run away from your kids. I think the more that you are able to love yourself and love your children through all of those things, the more you can more fully own yourself in motherhood.
I totally agree with that. The more you make okay, I think the less you're striving for perfection, the easier it is to love where you are. I think it's the unobtainable bar of the perfect parent that we have in our heads that actually robs us of the joy in the moment. And I actually think the more I strived to be the perfect parent, the more I hated it. Really, on some level, the more I was called into bigger wounds, to bigger triggers, to, you know,
I think the more you're called to face your darkness.
Exactly.
Because you're living a one-sided fantasy.
And that's exactly right, isn't it? As it's totally going to call you into the opposite. And as if we love our children all the time. Like, can we please, in this community, bust that fantasy that we're not all in moments of just hating our children.
Yeah.
Like,
and wanting to run away and fantasizing about how something else would be better, and like daycare or whatever it is, whatever your magical out is, everyone experiences it without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think you can be in love with them and out of love with them and still love them. I don't think...
And this is this whole principle, right? Like, love is being that synthesis of those two opposites. Like, true love, unconditional love, is actually embracing both the challenge and the support of love. The liking and the loathing, and seeing that those two things make up the whole. That is love, but we still have to crash against the illusion of what we think love is, which is always supportive, always infatuated, always, in rapture, which it's not. It's much more complex than that.
So maybe we'll just break this email down and start from there, and I'm going to start by asking you the question, Bridget. When did you fully accept and sit into your motherhood with everything that it brings? The changes in lifestyle, time, thoughts, body, tasks, demands, relationships.
I still haven't. I still haven't. Tell me a mother who has. Maybe,
I don't know.
I don't think that there is one. I certainly have days where I feel like, man, like this is definitely it. Like I feel so fulfilled. And then I have other days where I, really search the corners of my soul and my psyche and go, man, like, is this what I signed up for? Like, this is hard, or I don't like myself right now. I don't like who I've become right now. There's got to be more than this. I think we all must go through that. And I think the evolution of self that motherhood calls us into calls us to those places to really face ourselves and face what our values are and face the kind of family we want to raise and what we want to lay down as our legacy with our children. So I don't know, show me a mother that's really got there, and I don't know that you're going to find one, because I think even the mothers whose kids have left the nest would still wonder if they did the right thing, or if they're completely at peace with the decisions that they made, and if they're completely accepting of who they showed up as. I don't know, what would you say to that?
No, I 100% resonate with you. I don't know that you do. And in fact, what I would love to flip to you is that the very essence of being in pain and discomfort with motherhood is always for me a cry to awaken more of self. And so I guess I see it that motherhood definitely takes us to those places of ourself, which is why we talk about motherhood as a path to consciousness, is because it's not something, for the first time in your life, it's not something you have a choice to exit. It's not something you can avoid or run away from, because even when you run, you can't run far enough.
Yeah.
So you are forced, literally, sometimes, dragged into facing yourself and growth. And I actually think the more you fight what it's calling you to change, which is often our belief systems from our past, the more you fight that, the harder the parenting gig is.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah.
So I guess I look at the hard stuff not so much as, motherhood and this child and my kids and blah, 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 blah. I look at it very much as a self-reflective process of, wow, okay, I hit this edge today and that was scary, or that was not okay with me, or, I went really left when I was trying to go right. And what is the common theme there? And what does that mean for me? What is it calling me to expand? Is it saying that I need to honour myself more? And why am I not carving and creating the time to honour myself more and put back in so I've got more spaciousness? Is it that I'm meeting and striving desperately to meet every single one of my child's needs because the anxiety is overwhelming when I don't? And where does that come from?
Yeah.
And whose story is that?
And am I comfortable to stay in that place?
Well, and the pain you're feeling of running from that feeling of sitting in the anxiety is exactly the reason why you're feeling the way that you are, because you're running from the thing that's painful, so the pain gets bigger, right? Lesson with the feather, brick or sledgehammer. They just keep escalating until you actually,
face it.
Yeah. So, when I think about all of that stuff, like, let's go through it, the changes to your lifestyle. Yeah, That's probably the hardest one, I think, actually. Do you, maybe it is just for me. That sense of my time is no longer just my own.
No. I definitely feel like that because I really relish my own. Like I would quite happily sit for a book and read all day.
Yeah, me too.
And I really love I love quiet and silence, and I like my own thoughts. And so the constant interruptions or the constant feeling that my time is not my own, I think can be a hard one to wrestle with.
Yeah, that's definitely the hardest. But I think for you and I, Bridge, it creates the intention to create the time for that.
Yeah.
Where previously it was effortless and unconscious, now you have to make it conscious, and there's growth.
Yeah, and it also means that you use, I definitely think I use my time far more effectively because there's so much less me time, so I don't fritter it away.
Talk about productivity hacks.
Yeah.
And batching.
Yeah.
That's how we live our lives.
And this thing, I'm quite discerning about how I spend my time.
Well, you are actually, aren't you? You're very, very clear on what your top values are and therefore what you dedicate the time that you have to live an inspired life. That's really the ticket, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which we do talk about this in L2O and in Aligned Parenting, is if you're getting really frustrated with the lack of time that you have or the lack of space, and there's all these reasons why you don't have the time and the space to do the things you want to do, it's all still you.
It's still you, and you're building up resentment towards yourself in order to get yourself back into balance, in order to get yourself to live more authentically.
To actually make the changes you need to make, to put on your big girl pants and stand up and say, no, I am carving out this time for myself because it is a priority. And I know when I do this and I match that, I spend that time on the values that I value most in this world, my family, my career, my health and well-being, my study and my inspiration, then that overflows into the rest of my world. So in essence, I'm actually putting more in those cups than taking away from them.
And I'm always looking at how those things are serving, my other areas.
Exactly.
So that I don't feel like it's taking away from anything.
Exactly.
And that's a dance, we're constantly looking at that. But yeah, I can feel myself resenting myself if I give up my time to areas that are not fulfilling or that I don't perceive as fulfilling to what I really value most.
Which often is, we've had a lot of conversations about, does motherhood light me up or do I hide behind it? Like you and I have had a number of conversations of teasing that apart. I still don't think we're at the point of resolution, but it's a question we toss up. Is it's easier to be busy than it is to face the reality of where you're going and where you want to go consciously in your life. And sometimes I think motherhood is excellent because you can fill your entire day and night and not feel ultimately self-flagellatingly guilty for not reaching your big dreams.
Yeah, because you're in service.
Yes.
And you're busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I'd just float that out there too. In terms of, having a baby brings changes in your thought patterns, it's a shifting of values. So where family wasn't a priority, perhaps for you now it becomes a priority, and all of your values in life, so maybe you used to spend all of your time, energy and thoughts on career and friends, and all of a sudden you've had this baby and now you've got this value on family that's immense. And maybe consciously you haven't realized that, but all of a sudden all of your time, energy and thoughts are centered around the well-being of this family unit, of this child. That's a sign that your values have shifted. So maybe you don't care so much about your friendship groups. And it's just a sign to get really clear. We talk about it all the time in L2L. Get really clear on what living an aligned life looks like for you.
And noticing what your feelings are around that. I think some women really harbour feelings of guilt or, just self-flagellation or just discomfort around those shifting values. But there's no need to feel that way when you can really deeply sit in the shift that your life is taking, if that's fulfilling for you. Because there are totally ways to carve out new friendship groups that also serve the family value, or there's always ways to find the alignment. Again, it's just accepting the transformation that occurs.
And I think it's easy. I want to just maybe segue into the rose-coloured glasses version of our past that we often look at. Oh, before I had a baby, our relationship was like this. And our sex life was like that. And I had all this time to myself and it was like this.
And I got to just read all the time or shop when I wanted and
caught up with friends.
Spend
friends
money,
all the time.
like all these things.
Can you tell we're talking about our own voice? This kind of idea of rose-coloured glasses, that the past was better than the present. Can we just bust that fantasy right now, please?
Yes.
Because anytime you're running a fantasy, you're ultimately building a nightmare.
Yeah, and you're also not looking for the wholeness that it was. I mean, quite often, maybe the time that you're looking back on thinking it was great, that time that you weren't even enjoying where you were at then, you know, because you're yearning for perhaps where you are now.
Yeah. You know? And that there's always equal drawbacks and benefits.
Yes.
So where you perceive that currently you have less connection because you're not catching up with your friends as much, well, where have you actually now got more connection that you perceived you were missing connection back then?
Yeah.
Where have you got more meaningful connection now that you had less meaningful connection then? Or conversely, where has that really meaningful connection with friends morphed into really meaningful connection within your top values now?
Yeah.
Like, don't deceive yourself that there were as many drawbacks to the way that it was to the way that it is now. And all the pain is now is trying to get you more congruent to live a life that lights you up on your version of, you know, turning into who you need to be in this world.
Yeah, and I think that with that evolving sense of what success looks like, and I think particularly, you know, if you had a career or if you're really on this career track or developing yourself as an independent woman, the version of success you might have really fit what society said was successful. And if you're really deeply sitting in your motherhood now and really wanting to carve out a really intentional motherhood journey, potentially your new version of success isn't going to be supported by the wider world.
And doesn't that call you into your own self-worth?
Yeah, it really does. And so really noticing what your dialogue is around your version of success too, and what your beliefs are around what that looks like, can be really powerful, because there might be some big shifting that needs to go on for you to really sit more authentically and congruently in your motherhood.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Then she says the demands on you and only you. What do you think about that?
I try to make the demands not always only on me, actually. Maybe it comes from an enormous, intensive journey with my first.
I was about to say, do you think you were with your first?
Yeah, definitely with my first.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, when you put it like that, absolutely. I thought that I was the only person in the world who could provide for my son.
Me too. Who could meet his needs, who was responsible for meeting his needs, and who was responsible for wounding him.
Yeah, conversely, huh? Yeah, on the flip. Yeah, so I suppose I don't as strongly identify with that idea that I'm the only person that can...
No, but you've got there because there was pain from being that, right?
Yeah, that's right. The intense polarization of believing that I mean, it totally, like, I remember...
What was the fallout of that?
It affected my relationship. I think my husband and I weren't on the same page at all, because he didn't feel like heard at all and needed in the family, because he was like on the outer, because all my son wanted was me and my boobs and me to get him to sleep, and just me to be his everything, because I was just as much needing him. Like, we were like mirrored to each other. And so that did affected, you know, my relationship. It affected my ability to connect with, you know, my, you know, other close friends or family who didn't understand my style of parenting, didn't understand the intensive way in which I really wanted to forge this bond with my son. That meant that, you know, particularly early on, that I felt like other people couldn't meet his needs the way I could. So it was isolating, you know, in those other relationships. While it was building an incredible connection with my son, it was isolating for those other people around me, I think, looking back. And so naturally I've bred a scenario where I'm much more okay with other people being with my daughter, because I guess I recognise the flow of that energy and the flip of needing to be all things to my child, and perhaps, you know, the drawbacks of that, because I lived the drawbacks of that. What would you say?
No, I would say absolutely that. And I also think the more that we expect that it's only us that can meet the needs, the more we're running from our past.
Yeah.
I think that really is probably pretty telling of a pretty big void.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that it's you're very much trying to soothe the baby in you, I think, often when you're really feeling that wounding.
Because why can't someone else meet those needs equally?
Yeah.
Why? Even if you're talking about, well, it's me that has the breasts. Okay, but what if you bottle fed? Why? Is that painful for you? Like, these are all telling around the beliefs that you're still holding around the perfect person, the perfect parent, judging and viewing your past as being wounding as opposed to exactly what you needed. So it's all about really calling you into transforming the beliefs that you've held, that you've built a life upon, that perhaps no longer serve you and are really seeking to be uncovered and dismantled in order for you to be who you need to be for this next evolution of you and who you need to be for this child. It's all calling you into those pains. And I think the realization that like you that I've had is when I realize I don't have to, it's not actually on me to be everything. And
Surprise.
Yeah, it was like the biggest revelation ever. And how much more fun parenting becomes when it's not just all you. And it's me who made it all me. No one else said, this is your job. I said, this is my job and only I can do it because you don't do it as well, or they cry with you, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Or I don't like the way that you respond to them, so clearly that would be wounding for them. Like, how much is us? How much is them?
Yeah.
I just think my heart goes out to it's all on you, because it's just honestly not. And when we're looking at a whole unit, when we're taking up all of that space, there is no room for anyone else.
Yeah, it's true.
But when we step back, that whole unit, like a black hole seeking equilibrium, or a magnet seeking another part, someone else steps up. Someone else steps into that. And the genius there is the genius that exists there is not only in that dynamic, but the fluidity, the connection. You're viewing that situation, if you still think that's bad, but what do those people get out of it?
Yeah.
So what are they learning? What are they seeking? What are they connecting with? What is your child connecting with? What are they exposed to in terms of genius, in terms of resilience, in terms of learning? Like, they're exposed to multiple people as opposed to just you. And I would rather that my children learnt from everyone around them rather than from just me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I've got the golden ticket on it all. I think I know I view the world.
And the thing is, we have different children who perceive different things, and we might have every intention of, children making a certain kind of meaning from the way that we parent, but they may take a completely opposite meaning from it.
Because they're an individual soul.
We have no control over how we parent is perceived. We only set the intention.
Absolutely. The toll that it takes on your relationship. When did you fully accept the toll that it takes on your relationship, and how would you define that?
See, I suppose when I was earlier in my motherhood, I would have really felt a sense of really wounding around the toll it takes on a relationship. But I feel like further into it, I can see the richness that it's added.
Explain that. That's quite a different mindset.
Because it's called us into, my husband and I both have incredibly high value on family, so it helps that we are both really aligned in that value, so that we're both calling ourselves to grow more, which means ultimately in some ways we're showing up for each other more because we are calling each other to intentionally grow to serve our children. So, and because I have such a high value on family and I have a high value on relationship, it means that I am asking of myself to show up not only for my children but also for my relationship. That I'm not simply giving everything of myself in motherhood and leaving nothing for my husband, which therefore has meant that I have had to get better and better about knowing what boundaries look like for me, so that I still have something left to give my husband, and knowing how to give both, because they're very, very different needs for intimacy and connection, aren't they? And how do you be? And we've done a podcast around this, like, how do you still have intimacy with really young babies and be able to still meet those intensive parenting needs at the same time as meet those intimacy needs in a relationship? Like, it's an art. But for me, the value on family is so high that I'll find ways to do that. But it means, not retreating into comfort, but rather finding ways to expand when it might be easier just to, roll over and go to sleep, or, like flick the TV on and not deal with something. I think in many ways, mothering has called for our relationship to grow up in a way, because there's less places to hide, because you're
stripped back.
You're stripped back, and if you deeply value family, and you deeply value giving your children a great upbringing, then you can't hide behind your bullshit for too long before you're calling yourself to own it. And so that's sort of where I found our relationship has grown.
I have nothing to add to that, because I just want to say jinx.
Yeah, right?
Your sense of self and place in the world So this is a big one, right? Because this is kind of that whole big dreams thing.
It's funny because I think, I don't know if it was in the documentary film or whether it was in another podcast that you and I have talked about, where I used to read these, because like I read mothering blogs years before I became a mother. So it wasn't that I'd always been maternal, but that I was always like, I've always wanted to know what the next step is for me, and I've always wanted to like know in my head what I wanted that to look like.
Oh, Bridget, that's so organised of you.
See, I'm not organised, right?
Yes, rubbish.
I used to read, like, this is a segue, but my best friend at the time was, she used to, she's starting to be a midwife, and so I used to sit on the baby forums when I was like 21, like reading about birth.
Wow.
You know, like, so many, because I just found it fascinating. I just loved it. And
it
so.
lit you up.
Yeah, it
There's
really
your
did.
value, hey?
Yeah. And so for me, I didn't really feel like I had found myself in a professional capacity. And there was one particular quote that on this blog, it was called Girls Gone Child, and it was this American woman. And she said, everybody else talks about how they lose themselves in motherhood, but ultimately it was where I found myself. And that's what I was expecting motherhood to deliver for me. And it really has. Like, it's, I've called myself to expand in so many more ways than I had before I had children. For various reasons, because I want to be an example, because I want to live my voice and not what I think I should do. And I want to be of service in a way that is meaningful to me and meaningful to my values.
Oh, motherhood.
Beautiful.
So
it's like rainbows.
No, it's been fucking painful.
Yeah.
And it's been like painful crisis after painful crisis after painful crisis, with periods of limbo in between. That's growth and that's evolution. But I guess, like you, Bridget, I'm a fairly resilient person. And I always bring a sense of curiosity to the things that are not working in my highest areas of value, which is what you're saying. You're saying, but I have a value on making it work no matter what, is because that's such a high value of yours because you have an old childhood wound on it, because our values are fueled by our voids.
Totally.
That you just keep searching, and through the searching you keep evolving and you keep growing wisdom and you keep finding more and more breadcrumbs to what lights you up and to your authentic core along the way, because you're exposed to more and more of your truth as opposed to the truth that you've been cultured into.
Yeah, I'd say that wraps it up beautifully.
Yeah, so I think motherhood has absolutely been the making of me, and it inspires me daily, but not because of the, oh, my kids are so great thing, but because, fuck, it's brutal. But through brutal has come the clearest sense of myself. And I definitely see that as a defining characteristic between myself rocking motherhood and women feeling completely at odds with motherhood. And I think the difference is simply loving of the pain and accepting of the pain.
And leaning into the pain as opposed to seeing the pain as a problem.
Yeah.
It's actually saying to the pain, be my friend, I want to know you.
Yes. Yes, exactly. It was a mix of exactly and absolutely. Not sure how they came out. You're listening to the Nourishing the Mother podcast, where we believe you've got to nourish the mother to rock the family. And with that in line, we would like to remind you that on nourishingthemother.com.au/products, we have a series of little inspirational PDFs, downloadable audio series, lots for you to actually look at if there's something you'd love to dive a little bit deeper into, from consciously questioning your child's behaviour to flipping your birth, to our motherhood survival hacks, to the downloadable Flip Your Finances and Relationship Rescue series. So jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au/products just to see if there's something there that was going to boost your week. All right, so we're back and we're going to continue with this email. When did you actually fully, deeply, body-yearningly, mind-blowingly fall in love with your child?
I think it's always evolving. I think I find new parts to love. But in terms of when, I think with my son, I think it was straight away, but I think it was an infatuation. Whereas with my daughter...
Maybe hang on, just hang there for a minute.
Okay.
Can you explain what that means?
Infatuation. Yeah, so I think I was so starstruck and just humbled and in awe of the incredible nature of creating a human that I just threw myself all-consumingly into mothering him and seeing him as this perfect, innocent being that I couldn't harm, and so I had to get right and only saw essentially one side to him, therefore. So it wasn't a an unconditional kind of bring me everything, I love all of you kind of love. It was a I don't know how to kind of explain the infatuation with a newborn or with a baby, but it was almost like the rest of the world doesn't understand what this is, and this is just mine and he's mine, almost like an ownership thing. Whereas with my daughter, I think I had a much more realistic view of mothering and realistic view of the whole person that is born in a child, and that she isn't mine but comes of me. And so there was maybe like a healthier in some ways acceptance of who I was and who she was in that role. But my love for her, it has evolved in such a different way because I'm such a different person. And there's a richness there, but I feel like it's still, she's only like 14 months and I feel like I'm still getting to know her. So I don't know, I just think you find more ways to love. I don't know if I could pinpoint a moment where I just said that's the moment that I just am enraptured with you, because I think that's innate that we're programmed to be that with our children, and I think we just find more ways to become more aware of that and become more aware of the depth of our capacity to love. What would you say?
I totally agree with that. What would I say? My mind's kind of going two different ways. Where my mind is going is I'm thinking potentially the reason we've been asked this question is because this person feels like they're not that.
Yeah, and that's fair, and we know, that is such a classic pattern, I think, too. If you've had any kind of PND or any kind of massive identity crisis in motherhood, the baby can very much be seen as like the thing that's ruined this all for me, the thing that's ruined me, the thing that's made me not okay anymore, the thing that just needs to, change so I can be who I am again.
I actually think we all phase in and out of thinking and feeling that. And I think that is the definition of resentment, which for me happens when we have been through a period of infatuation.
Yes.
So, the infatuation might have come pre-conception. You might have had this beautiful fantasy around what motherhood was going to be like, what you were going to be like within motherhood, how you were going to be and not be. We're all the best hypothetical parents before we had kids, weren't we?
Do you know how many books I read?
The best.
Oh my God.
You're like the perfect parent before you had them.
Yeah. I had it nailed.
I believe you. I often think that when we're really sitting in the resentment of it, that it's really just an indicator that it's just us trying to balance that out, trying to get us to remove the judgment that we had on others and the world around us.
Totally, yes.
And get us to expand our composition of love. That love
a definition of what it means to love.
Yes, it's exactly right, of seeing what it is that love actually, takes us to and brings us to, and the people that we'd previously judged, that we expand our love towards them because we get to kind of walk their shoes a little bit more, or we get a little bit more empathy and insight into who they are. So we expand our love and capacity, with them. Are you okay? And I just think that this is probably not something that's talked about enough, and so I think we build a lot of isolation and shame around our own story on resentment. I definitely did. I definitely made myself 100 ways from wrong whenever I perceived that my child was anything but a perfect, innocent, angelic being. Like, judged myself incredibly harshly because how could I possibly be anything
for not believing that he was anything but that.
Yeah, how could I be anything like, because what would that mean? That would mean I was just like my mother.
Or, ingrateful or not deserving or all of
whatever.
those things.
Shame is so silent. I mean, it's guilt but directed towards self rather than towards others, right? And it's just a lopsided perception that there's more drawbacks than there are benefits.
Yeah.
And there's so many benefits even in the resentment. It's really getting you to love more of yourself, to love more of them, to love more people around you.
To allow other people to step in.
Yes, when you need to break, calls you into your boundaries, your sense of self-worth, your focus on where you're going in this world now that you have expanded who you are and the service that you provide in caring for a human being other than just yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I just think the resentment, and, that's why, I mean, Bridge, you and I talk about playing with this, and I certainly do it. Like, the group of mum friends that I have at school have given me the most enormous freedom outside of the conscious parenting world, just to be like, fuck, what an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
To be really real.
Yeah, and just the freedom in just being like, seriously.
Yeah.
Allows you the opportunity just to go, this is a multifaceted being, no different to me.
Yeah.
And anytime I box and cage something and make it wrong, it's going to keep manifesting and building until I actually deal.
Yeah.
And so here I am dealing with the fact that my child is not this perfect centric being, and nor am I, and nor was my mother.
Yeah.
And this whole dynamic.
And nor is the world.
No, and it calls us into our old wounds, it calls us into our own mirrors, it calls us into loving more of who we are and where we've come from, which then allows us to love more of us, which in turn allows us to love more of them. So, this whole being in love and being out of love, I would say that that feeling of mind-blowingly could eat you sensation is infatuation,
It's
not
definitely
love.
infatuation.
Yeah.
I can totally put myself back to moments with my son, particularly where I felt that. Like, I could just eat him.
Oh, me too. And I think you phase in and out of it, though.
Yeah.
Like, I do think it goes
I think with Sylvie, once I understood infatuation, I could pinpoint myself going there.
Yes, me too,
so I
now.
self-checked it.
Yeah.
But then it's still lovely to be in that.
It's still lovely to be in it, as long as you don't run with it and make it that's reality.
Yeah.
Because it's not.
Yeah, it's not.
It's designed definitely to give you this huge amount of benefits and oxytocin, desire to love and care and stay. But we can't stay there.
And the reality is, the more, and we know this, the more you're infatuated with your baby, the more you're going to breed a crazy toddler. Because the toddlers are designed to break your infatuation.
That's exactly right.
Your toddler will show you the resentment that you had hidden from yourself, that was always ever present with your baby, but that you weren't able to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So when do you fall mind-blowingly in love? I think with my first, I think it was a shock for me. I mean, I'd done lots of preparation and work for the birth, but when he was actually born, I remember being like, my husband was passed out in the bed next to me and I had him in the bed in between us. I remember just staring at him, unable to go to sleep, like, what the actual?
What do I do now?
Yeah, exactly. I remember walking, because that was in a birth centre, and I remember walking back into a house and being like, seriously, what happens now? What are you supposed to do? And I put him down on the floor and I was like, what now?
I remember with my son, I remember with Hugo, not being didn't quite believe they let me take him home. It was kind of but now what do we do? I'm allowed to take him with me? This baby in hospital. It's one of the most surreal feelings.
It really is.
Yeah.
So I don't think I really had that burst of infatuation with him. And I think I had definitely fantasized about parenthood pre giving birth. So, I was a naturopath who specialised in paediatrics. I was kind of immersed in the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then, definitely very conscious pregnancy. And then I had this baby and I was like, what? And so I went very dramatically from infatuation to,
what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Resentment.
I didn't sign up for this. What is this?
No, and, really seriously, I think if I look back, probably diagnosably could have had P&D.
Yeah.
And just that infatuation was so high that that resentment took me so low.
Yeah.
And I really struggled, and definitely didn't have the toolkit or the support system around me that I do, you know, now and with subsequent children, which I think definitely, you know, allow you the space to create more freedom and therefore freedom to love.
How much do you look at your fourth compared to your first? And that,
do you know, it's the funniest thing. Someone said that because it's actually really funny because my fourth actually is like a dead ringer for my first.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting, isn't it? And, you know, like, so it is seriously like blows my mind sometimes because I feel like I'm looking down a wormhole or something, you know, it's so crazy. Wow. And one of the mums said to me the other day, she goes, oh, so how does this one compare to all of your others? And I just thought for a moment, I went, can you really compare, kids? Because is it them or is it me?
Yeah.
Because this child is like dead ringer for my first. But I would have said my first was the hardest baby I ever had. So highly strung, never slept, highly, you know, a spirited baby, I used to call him. She's a dead ringer for him. But I would say she's my easiest and super calm. So is it them? Or is it me?
Yeah, and I don't know.
Because you're not the same mother.
Totally not. Despite what some people seem to think. But no, you are not the same mother.
You're not the same mother. So I don't think you can compare babies. And so
I'm more interested to know about your relationship with motherhood, with babies, with
just freedom. I can't tell you, the more babies I have, the more I love it. And the more I love it is because the less I've put on, the more babies I've had, the less pressure I've taken off myself in terms of the perfect style of parenting. And the more I've taken off the pressure of the what I consider to be sometimes really oppressive conscious parenting.
Yeah.
The more I've moved into fun and like, just fuck it, let's just do this shit. And the more I've done that, the more I've found me.
Yeah.
You know, I've found flirty, funny, you know, bit on PC, doesn't have to play by the rules.
Yeah.
You know, it's fun because it's me. I'm not trying to be someone else, and I'm not trying to do what someone else would do. And whenever I'm feeling like I'm feeling judgment, it's me judging myself. So I just have to have a moment to check in and go, there's no one in this room judging me. This is me judging me. So why am I judging me?
Why is this happening? Yeah.
And I have that moment, like even with my fourth, it's not like it's this cruisy experience. I still go, are you supposed to do this now? I can't remember. You know, do they do this normally? I still have those moments. But whereas previously I would have been like strung out trying to find the answer, now I'm like, whatever. We'll just go with it.
She'll be right.
She'll be fine. And, you know, I just have I'm smiling right now because I have so many memories of this happening right now because I'm in, you know, babyhood of number 4. And I keep having these flashbacks to my first because she looks so much like him and going, wow, I wonder if I had just held you while you fussed and cried and just held that space rather than frantically jiggling you and patting you and shushing you, whether you'd just fall magically asleep like this too. And I wonder if when you were really fussy, if I just picked you up and patted you and you had a burp like she does, even though you might need 5 burps within the next hour after I fed you, instead of just feeding you more, would you have settled like she does?
It's pretty interesting.
You know, like I have all these moments where I go, oh.
Right, I'm learning something here.
And I wonder if instead of sticking to a clock, if I had have just looked at you and your tired signs, would I have avoided the overtired, strung out, can't get to sleep, now you're not sleeping and I can't cope anymore thing? Yeah. Probably.
So fascinating, isn't it? Isn't it fascinating?
It's so fascinating to me, and I still laugh at myself and have compassion for myself at the same time, and have compassion for those older, wiser women around me who
tried to get you to see that.
Yeah. Who thought and knew that they had all of the answers, and I couldn't see
hear it. You can't hear it, right? Like, you know, and when you're not ready to hear it, you're not ready to hear it.
No, it's true. So I still think I have periods of time where I'm like, this child's really grinding on me at the moment. And there's a facet of, because they're us, they're a different facet of us, each child. And each time they grow and develop, well, bang, here's a new facet of you, welcome to the world.
Yeah.
And so there's periods.
I forgot about this.
I know, and I'm like, fucking hate that bit.
Fuck, not this bit now.
I know. Give me a break, come on. So that's kind of where I'm at now, where now I can say that. I can just be like, I don't have to have all the answers, and I don't have to put on this hat of, you know, I'm perfect and parenting's perfect and my children are perfect, and, you know, when they're not, it's my fault. I kind of just don't wear it that way, because I see these dynamics and the pain within these dynamics is so much more profound than perhaps what we want to consider that they are. And, you know, I really do still love my fuck-ups. I really still, you know, love the freedom in being able to go, you know, they're an asshole, this is shit, and I'm having a glass of wine. Get me the fuck out of this house. Like, I'm still completely fine to say that.
Yeah.
And be like, that doesn't mean I love them less.
Yeah.
But I would have judged that mother. Man, I would have judged me back then with number one for sure. But me with number one back there, I had no idea who I was as a woman. It was a completely ungrounded energy. And what has happened is I've got really, really strongly rooted in who I am now, and it allows me the freedom to just be whatever.
And to embrace all parts.
And therefore, the fun comes, the love without the infatuation, the opening up to the feeling of grace and magnificence, and the saying, fuck this shit part of it too.
Yeah.
So,
To be able to really own and live in and dance in the spectrum of it all.
yes. Oh, that's way more poetic than me with my fuck it.
But it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. And I mean, I think that's the beauty too, and particularly when you do really go down perhaps a more mainstream schooling route too, because you are forced more and more to own
Totally is.
that full mirror of
How painful that was for me to enter that, you know, spectrum of life. And now I'm so grateful. So interesting.
it is.
And how much my son totally took me there. Like, I wouldn't be there were it not for him.
Yeah, because he didn't want to fit the track that you were taking.
No, like, how, I mean, what a gift.
Yeah.
So even the things we think are wrong are often right. Can't pick it. So we hope maybe you've got a little something out of this email. If you have something that you would love to, like, I'd really love to know what the question is that you would want to know. No bars, total truth, that mother behind that closed door. What do you want to know about her and her world, and how it operates or doesn't operate, what the truth of her is? That's the questions we'd really like to know from our tribe. So like this beautiful listener, if you really have a moment where you could just open up to us in an email or a private message on Facebook or Instagram, we would really love to collate all of that and really create a really meaningful experience for women to you know, let go of the perfect parent, to light themselves up and, you know, find their freedom in the dance.
Yeah. So beautifully said. Absolutely.
So nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Instagram and Facebook. And you, Bridget?
Suburbansandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
Well, what about your next movie? Do you want to say that?
It is called Heal, and it's sold out in Melbourne. But there's still tickets. Yeah, there's still tickets in Geelong and Byron Bay if you're in those areas. It's going to be a fascinating conversation around the mind-body connection and healing. And, you know, it really is a mirror of so much of what we talk about, but applied to physical health and well-being. So it's just going to be great.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. And, of course, where can we go for lots and lots of great resources for you?
Thank you. Is thepleasurenutritionist.com.
So if you have somebody who's having a pregnancy, or if you're pregnant, or if perhaps you're thinking about a blessing way, Jules has some great ebooks. So definitely hop on there and explore those.
Thanks, Bridget. I always forget to say that. So thank you.
Oh, I love them.
So don't forget, you've got to nourish the family. Wrong way round. Am I ever going to get this? You have to nourish the mother to rock the family. It was this flippant thing that we said, and then we were like, that's it.
That's a great
That's what we should
tagline.
like say.
It's a great tagline.
But bear with us while we nail it. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.